Welcome back to the Rain Race podcast. In a new year, I promise you one thing. We are competent, okay? We gave it a college try to get you looking kind of smooth over there tonight. But, if you saw the struggles behind the scenes, you'd know that we're just happy with where we are right now. Anyways, I'm your host, GT Rain. Of course, off to my right as always. For the first time in a month and 1 day, Stu, how are we doing? It's been a minute since we've been on this podcast.
It doesn't feel like it's been that long. It feels like we've spoke about things and racing and fast cars since then, but I suppose not. And I don't know. Maybe that was for the better. If this is how the if this is how the new year has started off for us.
Yeah, we will. We gave it a college try. It's interesting because I spoke to you a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about doing an episode, but boy, with all the news of off-season discussion and perhaps us as a country trying to buy Canada, we just didn't have a lot to discuss on the IMSA WEC front. As it turned out, I was looking through the news stories from the past couple of weeks, right around the Christmas New Year break time, and there was very little news coming out. So I said we'll just hold off on this one. And also, as it turns out, during the off season, you and I are a bit busier than I guess anticipated as well. So finally getting a show in tonight on a Sunday, I think for the first time ever.
True.
But
cross that off your bingo card.
Hopefully return to a more frequent and traditional schedule as we start up the season again, which, wow, off season is actually about over already. I know we've brought it up a few times, but it's, what is it, only a couple months really between the final race at Bahrain and the first race for the IMSA Weather Sports Car Championship next weekend at Daytona. Got plenty to preview in tonight's episode to look forward to all of that. First things off, you will be... Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was thinking today, like this afternoon, I was out and I was like, man, oh man, 7 days from today, like the Rolex 24 is going to be wrapping up. That's insane. It's wild to think about that it's so close.
Snuck up on you with all the video content that you're pushing out there. I don't know how you have time for it. I mean,
I don't know either. I might be a little bit in over my head this off season, but
I wake up every day. There's a new Off in the Esses video in my subscription box, and it's
you'll live and you'll learn.
Yeah. You will be heading out to Daytona this week, which is one of the reasons why we're not on our traditional Tuesday night time slot. Second year on the trot for you at the 24 Hours of Daytona. What are you looking forward to there?
Oh, what am I looking forward to? Well, I'm looking forward to not having the rain that they experienced at the track today. That I don't know if you saw any of the videos that were floating around, but they got dumped on today during the Roar testing. But no, I mean, what am I most looking forward to? Rolling up to that first, getting off the highway and just seeing Daytona rise like out of literally nothing. Just an average, looking American city, and then all of a sudden there's this massive grandstand that's there, and coming in through the tunnel. I still remember going in through the tunnel last year and what that feeling was like to be on the infield. And I mean, there's so much that I'm looking forward to. Seeing the Lamborghini, the SC63 compete in its first Rolex, like I feel like that it gets forgotten a little bit because we had it on the grid last year, and it's not a brand new car, but like this is the first time that's going to be competing in this race. And oh man, there's so much to look forward to. I can't wait to get out of this cold weather that we're having, and I'm sure you are probably experiencing some of that as well, and get down to a hopefully sunny Florida.
It's funny you mention that. I'm actually mid-snowstorm right now, so if this podcast goes dark at any point, I suppose you'll probably understand why. Um, I will not be going down to Daytona this year, unfortunately. Last minute cancellation. Planned on going there initially, all the way up until basically the night before I planned on booking flights, and realized that I just don't. Well, there are a couple of reasons, but one of the main reasons is I do not have as much time as I anticipated with how many things I will be doing this year. And that includes going to, hopefully, the 12 Hours of Sebring in a couple of months' time. First time back at that race for me since 2022 for the IMSA and US debut of the Aston Martin Valkyrie hypercar, which I'm very much looking forward to seeing both on track and also in person, and hearing as well, especially. And then with the summer, 24 hours of Le Mans, 24 hours of Nürburgring, 6 hours of Coda. There's a lot on the plate. So had to forego Daytona this year, unfortunately. It'll be the first time since 22 that I was not there at the track, but very much looking forward to catching up with the first race of the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship from the comfort of my own home, which sometimes having a nice couch to sleep on while you watch the race is better than the cold turf in the grandstands at Daytona, as has become my customary for the last couple of years now.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. A little bit more comfortable, at home with a bed.
Yeah.
Not a bench.
I'm telling you, that turf in the grandstands was pretty helpful, though. Okay, I don't know what level it was on. If you're not familiar with Daytona, the grandstands are like 3 levels. It is proper stadium seating. I mean, when you talk about, I think they call themselves the world's first motorsports stadium, and if you go there, you'll understand why. Because it's unlike any other racing track I've been to personally. I mean, I guess a little bit Indianapolis has sort of a stadium feel as well, depending on what section you're in. But Daytona, really, with the 3 different levels that actually might be 4 different levels. But everything the way it's set up inside with concessions, it feels like a standard stadium. I digress. I got off point a little bit there. There is a small little patch of turf on one of the grandstand zones that was very popular for myself and a few other people in previous years. Use a backpack as a pillow, and gets a little chilly at night. You might want to bring a blanket, and also the wind blowing through the grandstands does not help with that. So that might be the best you're getting, though, if you're not leaving the confines of the track and you don't have a place to camp.
I can give this recommendation as well. And this is what I did last year. And if you are torn on what to do, and you're going to be and you don't have a parking pass secured or anything yet, then consider this. Last week, Daytona released a batch of Lot 1 parking. I think it's Lot 1.
Yep.
And it's right outside the one of the entrances to the the big stadium section, grandstand seating. It's right where the trams pick you up. And you can get right there. It's like $100 for the Saturday and Sunday. We did that last year, and it was great to have a snooze in the car there in the middle of the night, and you're right there. It was a 10-minute walk from the car to get back up to see like sunrise sort of thing. So it was great. It's a great option if you're still thinking about what you're gonna do.
Yeah, can recommend sleeping in a car. I did that actually the first year I was at Daytona for a couple hours. I did that at Le Mans in 23 as well. The problem with the car, though, is especially if you plan on seeing as much of the race as you can, set a very loud alarm, because the thing I've realized with getting in a car where it's comfortable, or anywhere, I guess, if you're camping at the track, say you want to wake up for sunrise. That was my plan for Le Mans in 23, but we had a rental BMW with one of those, the front seats that recline completely flat. They're very comfortable cushioned seats. I had a blanket there that I brought from home. I was comfortable. Woke up at the time, didn't know what time it was, but let me put it this way. When my plan was to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning so I could go see the sunrise, and I woke up, it was fully daylight out. If you've ever woken up and then realize that you don't remember an alarm going off, and it's like a weekday and you have to go to work, and the initial thought is, what time is it? I was in a real panic there, thinking, did I just
Yep.
miss the entirety of Sunday? So there's your little tip of advice there. Don't fall into the same trap I did. We'll have plenty more to discuss with tips and tricks for Daytona if you are attending in person at the end of the show. I do want to go back to what we had this weekend. If we can actually talk about something on the weekend while it's still the weekend. The Roar Before The Rolex 24, the annual IMSA testing weekend. Also have some support races in there as well for the VP Sports Car Challenge. But we're going to mainly be focusing on the actual WeatherTech practice sessions that were going on this weekend. There were 7 sessions total. I don't want to dig too deep into testing times. Of course, I tried not to do that too much on this podcast because it's testing at the end of the day. But we did have a much different format this year for the Roar Before the 24, sort of going back to what we had traditionally seen in previous years before they introduced a qualifying format for the WeatherTech Championship into this weekend, and back to a fully nothing but testing weekend for those cars to get on track.
Yeah, it was a weekend full of testing. They were scheduled for 7 sessions. I don't know if they actually got 7 sessions in though, because the weather this morning ate into quite a bit of that. But scheduled for 7 sessions, and as you said, you can kind of take from this, what you will. It's everybody's out there doing different testing runs. But that being said, there were still some relatively competitive times that were put down by some of the cars. They're going to be a lot tighter come race day. But one of the things that I wanted to mention too is this was initially this Roar Before the 24 weekend. There's supposed to be some targeted performance testing completed during this weekend in a couple of sessions on one on Saturday afternoon and one on Sunday. And that actually didn't end up happening. They didn't end up going forward with with those sessions. Essentially, that would be helping to create the BOP for the GTD and GTD Pro classes. They had essentially one car and drivers that they were a factory driver essentially that was going to be running a certain number of, essentially a stint that IMSA creates for them. But they didn't end up going through with that. So whether that was because, maybe the weather forecast wasn't going to be optimal for that and they weren't going to be able to get good data out of it, who knows? But the BOP for the GTD and GTD Pro classes are going to be set purely by IMSA. They should have plenty of data on these cars now. There's only the BMW M4 GT3 Evo is the only new-ish or the only updated GTD car on the grid this year. So I think, it just wanted to make note of that. It was interesting that it got canceled kind of at the last minute.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see IMSA trying out a new procedure for getting that balance of performance set, specifically with those GT cars. We have seen in the past years, not too far in the past, that there were, let's just say, some BOP disparities at the 24 that were brought up rather vocally a couple of years ago. So it's interesting to see IMSA's approach to try to mitigate that. But as you mentioned, this is really a continuation for a lot of those cars in those 2 classes this year. So as you mentioned, IMSA has plenty of data to pile off of. They also had plenty of on-track time this weekend. Between those cars. They did get 7 sessions in. I know session 6 was delayed this morning.
Oh, okay.
I cannot remember if it was abbreviated or not as well, but I do know very few cars actually took part in that session. Or at least very few pro cars.
8 laps at most were what was completed. Yeah.
Well, and why destroy a car a weekend before the biggest race of the year? So you have to look at it from that perspective.
And there's going to be there's no rain scheduled for next weekend either. So
Florida forecast, take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, that could change.
So as I've mentioned, with of course with the BOP subject to change and with it just being a testing session, it's more difficult to read into actual pace this year with the Roar than it has been previous years where we had qualifying as part of it. We had a qualifying race. This year, though, I just want to talk briefly about some of the cars that were standouts to me across all four classes. BMW really was a pace setter this weekend in the GTP category. They were fastest in 3 of the 6 sessions that they took part in. Of course, session 7, if you're not aware, was only for the bronze drivers, so only the LMP2, GTD Pro, and GTD classes had cars taking place. In theory, a GTP car could have taken part in that session because there's no restriction for a bronze driver not being able to race in that class, I don't believe.
True.
But none in this case. So they were not on track for session 7. 3 of the 6, though, headed up by BMW, including a 1-2. I believe it was in the 4th practice session this weekend. And the fastest overall lap of the weekend set by Dries Vanthoor in the 24 BMW, which is a 135.424. Reason I bring this up is I put out a call for predictions a couple of weeks ago, looking for some people to give their thoughts on what they think might be happening in the IMSA season this year. Planning on making a video about that will go out before the race next weekend. And I saw a lot of people mentioning they think this is the year BMW is finally going to get some more successful results on the ground. Year 1 for them was a bit of a struggle. Last year they had some races, particularly Indianapolis, where they had very strong pace, but they didn't have the consistency to really be anywhere in the championship hunt. I was interested to see how many people thought BMW would really have a shot this year. And of course, it's only testing, but for them to hit the mark running this strong so far this year, I think was a little bit noteworthy for me.
That's fair. After qualifying on Thursday, I think that will be a big indicator of whether this was smoke or whether there's actually something there with BMW, because this has been a team and a car that, it's been hard to get a gauge on, especially at the Rolex. We've seen them be strong at other races throughout the season, but the first season when BMW showed up back in 2023 to the Rolex, they were clearly behind the 8 ball compared to the other GTP manufacturers, and it showed. You come back a year later, and we know now all the turnover that the team was going through, and the inconsistencies that we saw with them last year. Ultimately, they came together and had a very nice weekend in Indy. They showed some great speed at other races throughout the season as well. But I think overall, safe to say, it was still inconsistent. So now I guess maybe this is the first year that we get an actual gauge on the BMW at this track in this race, and they really an opportunity to see what they can do. And I think qualifying will be the first real opportunity that we see them open it up. Like you said, it is just practice, but to see them go out and be consistently quick across the sessions is certainly a positive for them. And to see how they were evolving towards the end of last season, you could very easily see them, kick off on the right foot here in 2025. And frankly, it's something that they kind of desperately need with the way that that car has evolved over the past couple of years. So yeah, I think BMW, at the very least, BMW is going to be very much a manufacturer to keep a very close eye on throughout the entire Rolex weekend.
Yeah, and that comes in more ways than one. I mean, even if they're not ultimate race-winning pace at this race, for them to be in contention and for them to show strength in this race, they were just sort of a quiet car last year. There weren't too many races where they were a standout. Of course, Indianapolis being the exception to that, where they had a 1-2. But I think this year, if they can just put together more consistent results, but just quietly be there in the background, podium here, podium there, maybe a race win more than once this season, you'll never know what performances they can get. They have a couple new drivers as part of that lineup this year, a couple new drivers for the endurance, especially the 24 hours as well. with Kevin Magnussen stepping over for the Rolex 24. Dries Van Tor, of course, putting down the fastest time in the Roar this weekend, coming over from Team WRT's M Hybrid V8 program. We'll have to see what this season spells out for BMW. The other standout to me in GTP, you don't have to look far down the order, just the return of Myer Shank Racing. And
Yeah.
I think this is going to be one of the main talking points that we have this year, is they weren't back on the IMSA grid last year. They took a 1-year hiatus. There were some rumors of a couple different manufacturers they could end up partnering with. They're back with Honda. They're back where they were in 2023.
Yep.
And where they were in 23 was essentially what should have been a championship winning program if they didn't have that penalty that carried over from Daytona in 23.
They would have cruised to a championship.
Absolutely. And now they're back with not only 1 but 2 cars on the grid. And if you look down the results for the Roar weekend, if you want to take those with any weight whatsoever, they're closing out the top 3 for the fastest times this weekend, with car number 93 and car 60 having the second and third fastest times this weekend. I'm very curious to see what Myer Shank Racing is able to do this year. Of course, as I said, they had that year off, but they look to me like one of those teams that isn't going to skip a beat, despite the fact that they missed the entirety of last season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to have a video coming out, I think, tomorrow, I'm hoping, and talking about, a couple of like who my championship picks are, and Myer Shank Racing is my championship pick in GTP. I think that, you look at them and what they did in their first year with the car. They came out, they won 3 races. They would have been the GTP championship winners had Daytona not happened. And honestly, like, we can, you can split hairs and say, oh, like, how much performance, like, how would it have affected them if they hadn't cheated at the Rolex? And we saw the sister Wayne Taylor Racing car finish second in that race. Like, they were going to be on for a good run, not doing what they did. So like, they had a very, very good 2023 year. They were forced into a year off. And now they're going to be hungry. They're going to come out. This is a team that, like, sports car racing is ingrained in their DNA. This is like, they've been doing this a long, long time and have gone through a lot of, they've gone through a lot to get to the point where they are today. And they are going to come out swinging this year, I think. The Acuras didn't look incredible, like, I think, looking at it from a season perspective last year. But we also got to remember that, it was announced Wayne Taylor Racing was going to be leaving Acura pretty early in the season. You got to wonder how that kind of can affect, performance, as time goes on. So I don't know. I'm looking at Myer Shank Racing as legitimate, very serious threats this year. And I mean, the driver lineups are very, very strong in both of those cars. They're keep an eye on Myer Shank Racing. I don't really think there's anything other to say than that.
Yeah, I'll give you credit for picking them as your championship favorites right now. I would say that's not an ambitious, it's not a very ambitious pick, but I say that in the most respectful way possible to the team. Yep. Just what they've been able to pull off in recent years, especially with that Acura program. It seems like that's really where they started to hit their stride. So back with that same partner where they've had success before. We'll have to see if they can carry that over this year.
Yep.
Over at LMP2, the nice thing about looking at the Roar times this weekend, to be honest with me, is that there's not really a standout. I'm looking at the times right now, and if I'm not misreading... Oh, I was misreading. Okay, so I was going to say in the top 9 cars, there was not a single repeat car between all of the fastest driver laps this weekend. But that's not true, because we have the 43 Inter-Europol setting 2 fastest times in the top 7. But nonetheless, this is a class that's generally pretty wide open. But the other thing that I want to talk about with LMP2, that I'll bring up later when we preview the race in a little bit more detail, is this is generally a class that is very hard to predict going in. You can't look at the timesheets right now because, of course, everyone's running the same car this year at least. Last year we had the Sean Creech Motorsports Ligier. But this year everybody's running the same car. And this car has been around since 2017. The teams who are running those cars now understand those cars. And the cars very rarely have reliability issues. We have a lot of drivers in this class that are not traditional sports car racing drivers. Some one-offs in this class, like Colton Herta is coming over with IndyCar experience. Sebastian Bourdais is making his LMP2 debut, I want to say. Is that?
I don't know. That's a good question.
At least in the Orica, it would be his debut. I was trying to remember if he was a one-off at Mosport last year, but no.
Oh no, yeah.
Was he?
He went with Tower, didn't he? I think he was in the
Tower.
Oh no, is that only this
Ranger
year?
van der Zande raced for someone last. It's one of those moments again.
I thought Bourdais was on it. Yeah, keep talking.
Someone help us out here. Regardless, this is a driver who, coming over from the GTP ranks over into LMP2, this is a car that he doesn't have a ton of experience with, but you see a lot of drivers in this class like that. And I think this is also a class that highlights standout drivers as well. I mean, look at last year's Sunrise stint. We had a great battle for the lead between Connor Zilisch and Malte Jakobsen, both sort of prototype racing. I don't want to say prototype racing proteges because Zilisch, of course, took a different path for 25. Jakobsen's now racing for Peugeot Total Energies in the WEC. So this is a class that's just highlighted standout driver performances in the past, and especially with some of those rookies. I'm really excited to see if we get a similar story like that this year.
Yeah, you're right. He did not compete at Mosport last year. So there were a handful of GTP drivers though. Yeah, I mean LMP2, as you were saying, it's so difficult to predict. In some of the shorter races, you can definitely lean towards the bronze drivers that are a little bit more comfortable at the track. Some of those 2 hour 40-minute races. If there's a bronze driver that sticks out, that they have to do a full stint in that car, that can be a huge difference maker. But a bronze driver having to do their 4 hours, whatever minimum drive time is. For this, it's probably even less than that. Kind of early on in the race, in a 24-hour race, doesn't really mean a whole ton at the end of the day. So, you look at these LMP2 lineups, and they're stacked with, we're talking about GTP, like some of the best drivers in the world. You're talking about, Colton Herta coming over from IndyCar, like. There's so many good drivers. Felipe Massa also back here. So you're talking about so many strong drivers in the LMP2 class. It is a bit of a toss up, but the class is going to be about staying out of trouble, right? We see so often, especially in the LMP2 class, I feel like, especially the past couple of years, mistakes being made in the early hours of the race. I think it was Stephen Thomas in the 11 TDS entry last year, lightning quick. That car's always super quick, but made a mistake, in the opening hours of the race, coming out of the bus stop, had a hard crash, race over. So it's going to be, it is like this for all of the classes, but I think it's a little bit more so in LMP2, making sure to keep everything clean for these opening stints of the race, and then ultimately just staying in it at the end, because you have a good if you're in the hunt at the end of the race and you got a speedy driver in, anybody's going to be on for the win.
Yeah, and who could forget the photo finish we had there a couple of years ago back in 23?
True.
LMP2 is definitely a class to keep an eye on, and sometimes it's one of those classes that sometimes gets overlooked a little bit because of we have very flourished pro classes now between prototype and GT and IMSA. We're very fortunate to have that, but LMP2 especially is a class that at Daytona has
Yep.
seemingly not disappointed. So keep an eye on that. GTD Pro, again, we're reading into testing times here, but I'm very interested to see Pfaff Motorsports punching right out the
Oh yeah.
gates with that new Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo 2. Um, especially when you look at the other competitive times that were set this weekend, mainly by AO Racing, the defending champions in GTD Pro. Look, let's just say it as it is. Pfaff is a championship caliber team. They're a championship winning team in IMSA. And 24 really wasn't a season that showed what they were capable of, I think. They struggled with that McLaren. There were certainly moments where it looked like they would have some success. But a lot of disappointing races for them last year.
Yep.
A lot of people were saying, "Oh, this is they shouldn't have switched from the Porsche in the first place. They could have had that championship that AO Racing was able to secure last year." I think this year, yes, it is a new car for them, but of course the Lamborghini is a car with no shortage of success in IMSA already, and I'm very much hopefully looking forward to seeing a championship battle, perhaps between Pfaff and AO Racing, because I think both of those two teams are extremely strong championship winning teams from previous seasons, and it would be great to have sort of a storyline to set the rest of the season coming out of Daytona here.
Yeah, I think I echo, kind of everything that you said there. Seeing Pfaff at the top of the timing charts again. You mentioned it. It's practice. It's testing, but that is a very positive sign for them, and I honestly don't think it should surprise anyone. Putting my personal homerism for Pfaff aside for a minute, and you look at the driver lineup here. Like there were there's three factory Lamborghini drivers that are going to be in this car. You have Jordan Pepper, you have Marco Mappelli, and you have Andrea Caldarelli. Like three very, very quick drivers. The Lamborghini they've had good driver lineups, especially in GTD Pro in the past few seasons. The first year of the car was kind of a throwaway. It was slow. But it's like that for a lot of cars in their first year. Last year, I honestly can't remember the Lamborghinis making that much noise in the race. I don't remember if they ran into some issues or whatnot, but ran into, obviously didn't win or anything.
Yeah.
But they have shown really good pace at some of the other races on the calendar. Petit Le Mans seems to be a track that Lamborghini just loves and really, really meshes well with. In GTD Pro, we have not seen a Lamborghini full time in that class either. And I think that Pfaff, a team that again has won back-to-back championships in 22, 23 or 22, 21, 22. Yeah, 21, 22, right?
I hate when we get called out on the spot here. Who won the championship in 23?
It had to. The first year of GTD Pro, I think, was 2022. Because 2022, 2023, 2024, and last year was the third
yes,
season.
So 21.
Yeah.
Okay, 21 was the last.
21,
okay.
22.
We got it.
They've multi-time champions here. They know how to win, and you have a car that is it hasn't been proven out over a full season, but I think this is a good pairing. Pfaff coming out of the gate strong is something that build a little bit of momentum for the team, which is something they haven't done in the past 2 seasons. Yeah, I'm probably just ranting at this point, but I think there's a lot of reasons to like Pfaff going into this race. But there's a lot of arguments to be made for a lot of cars in this class too. GTD Pro is like is an insane class.
It's interesting we say this because I think I said when we had the IMSA entry list unveiled, I think I said exactly that GTD Pro, when it came out, I was honestly a little bit skeptical.
I think a lot of people were.
The car counts in that first season in 22 were okay at best. I think we all understood that the writing on the wall was that GTD wasn't going to be around. and that GT3 was the way forward, but it really took a couple of seasons for that class to get a flourished car count.
Yeah.
And they're at that point now. It's a very competitive class. And yeah, there's a lot to look at in this class. There's a lot of very strong driver pairings. I'm very glad that we have a place in GT racing and IMSA where factory drivers can still be represented, because over in the World Endurance Championship, some people, I guess maybe myself included, are a little bit apprehensive, I guess, about the fact that the GT racing is set up as a Pro-Am only format, or Pro-Am only class. In IMSA, we are fortunate enough that there is still a place where you mentioned the strength of that fast driver lineup with 3 Lamborghini Pro factory drivers, that they have a place for that in this championship. So
Yeah, and then some schmuck called James Hinchcliffe.
well, he's your guy, okay? Listen, we don't claim him.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, I'm very excited to see the championship battle that hopefully ensues down that GTD Pro class in 25.
Indeed.
And finally, in the very expansive and very difficult to throw a dart on the board and make your prediction for GTD class, a lot of changes in this class this year. Of course, Iron Dames switching over to a Porsche, Gradient Racing switching over to a Mustang. There's just a lot of different changes in this class this year. And that's actually one of the changes I want to highlight in IMSA in general this year. I was going to save this for a little bit later, but this is a good place to bring it up. Is 23 to 24 was not a substantially different or monumental change for teams in IMSA, but 24 to 25 really is. We were talking about the IMSA silly season way back in early summer last year.
Yeah.
Pretty much right as the announcement was made that Ganassi wouldn't be returning to IMSA in any capacity in 2025. Or at least wouldn't be returning with Cadillac, was that initial announcement. That really opened up the floodgates very early on. We've had a lot of drivers switch to different manufacturers across the board. We have new teams in GTP with Riley confirmed to be stepping up with that Lamborghini program. We have teams that in GTD that previously drove other cars now switching over to new cars, which I just mentioned. There's a lot of changes and a lot of new variables in play here for this IMSA season. And I think that's one of the key things I'm looking forward to this year, is seeing how some of those changes stack up. Because we talked about how much Pfaff struggled last year with that McLaren. We've talked, at least I've talked many times in the past about how much Wayne Taylor Racing struggled with that Acura program, didn't put together a championship run.
Yeah.
They're both in new positions this year. So we'll have to see if those pay dividends for them. But at least going back to the GTD class, there's a lot of changes in play here to look forward to. So I want to get some of your thoughts, but I will say, just in the spirit of, I think, going over the rest of the classes this weekend, Lamborghini also showing a lot of strong performance in this class as well, with the 78 Forte Racing Frank Pereira, also Lamborghini factory driver, topping the timesheets in that class.
Yeah, I think once you look at the the GTD Pro and then compare it to sort of the GTD sort of running order of manufacturers, it looks fairly similar. But like we said as well, it is just practice. We'll probably come out and we'll see qualifying, and this will be completely flipped on its head and shaken upside down, and everything will fall everywhere. So one thing that about the GTD class is it's gonna be close, because it's such a large class. It's going to be really important that you really can't find trouble in this race, because it's going to be difficult to claw your way back through that field. But that being said, is this a good point to transition to making it a little bit easier to potentially claw your way back through a field, especially on restarts?
Sure.
In a race?
Sure. You can take it.
Yeah, so to transition off of off of the Roar times, and two, one of the larger changes that we're going to see on the IMSA grid this year. That's with the class split procedures. So there's going to be a slight variation in how the final class split is performed before, or I guess this would be on full course yellow restarts, but it also does apply to race starts as well. So at the beginning of the race, the GTD Pro and the GTD classes are going to be split. Unlike last year where they were mixed up all together and often had people asking why that was the case. And then on restarts, they're also going to be separate as well. So during the final class split, the GTD Pro cars are going to pull out and pass any of the GTD cars that are ahead of them. So it will essentially line up GTPs at the front, followed by all the LMP2s, followed by all the GTD Pros, and followed by all the GTDs. Now, this is going to be a big change for some of the, maybe more for the GTD Pro cars, because there were plenty of instances in past seasons where, if you're a GTD Pro car and maybe you have a bit of a slower pit stop or something like that, you could wind up, being 10, 15 cars back in the GTD class, sort of behind any of your GTD Pro counterparts. And, if you're at the point in the race where it's not the AM drivers in the GTD cars anymore, you're not going anywhere. You're not going to, good luck passing 15 of your fellow pro drivers in the same machinery as you. It's going to be pretty difficult. So hopefully what this ultimately leads to is some closer racing and some better battles coming out of full course yellow restarts. So theoretically it should do that. I guess the concern always is more close battles coming off of a yellow. Do safety cars breed safety cars? Do yellows breed yellows? Probably a little bit, but I think this is going to be a good change for seeing some good battles play out in the GTD classes off of a restart.
Yeah, we talked about that procedure in a previous episode when it was announced. I gave quick thoughts on it there. I do have one concern about it, mainly with IMSA endurance races, is the prevalence of final hour. I've almost trademarked final hour full course yellows in IMSA because it seems like no matter how clean and drama free the race has been, there usually ends up being a final incident within that final hour of the race that shakes things up. In theory, as you mentioned, stay on the lead lap in your class and you could be all but 10 feet away from being a lap down in the class, and then all of a sudden you're back at the tail end of the field. Or not the tail end of the field, the tail end of your class on that final restart with an hour left in the race. So I do think this is something that probably will be prevalent in the 24 hours of Daytona. I wouldn't be surprised if we have a yellow flag in the final hour, maybe 2 hours of the race, where this really brings somebody back into contention. My only hope is that anything surrounding this is only positive and that we're not talking next week, next Tuesday night, about how it completely ruined a race for somebody who really was in a deserving position to win that race. We'll see. It's going to make racing closer, but I just hope it doesn't cause any negative consequences as well.
Yeah, no, that's a very reasonable, hesitation with it all. I guess we just got to hope at this point, right? We talked about it a lot at various points of last season of, what do we need to do to clean up some of the, driving standards got poor at times last year. And we just got to hope that this doesn't make that problem worse. It's so hard to say how it'll go, right? Because you could make the argument that, the GTD pros, they were going to be more aggressive in this situation last year because they knew that they had to absolutely go in that moment just to catch up to their fellow class competitors at the end of the race. Maybe now that's not going to be an issue, it's going to put cars in, fewer bad spots, maybe, and hopefully lead to less incidents. But I guess time is going to tell, right? Ask us after, 3 or 4 races of the season, and we'll probably have a pretty good idea of how things are playing out.
Well, and I think you mentioning GTD Pro and GTD is a great point, because it's a struggle that the other classes don't have to deal with, where if you're sent to the back of the field as a GTD Pro car and you have to pass all of the GTD cars in a line before you can get to your own class leader, those are all cars that are the same exact car that you're in. You're not in a GTP car where you can fly by everybody else on a straightaway or in the corners. LMP2, you can say the same. If you're in a GTD Pro car, especially with how expansive the GTD grid is, was it 22 cars at the Rolex this year?
21 or 22, yeah.
It's not a fair comparison for them to make their way back up to the front of their class as it would be for the GTP cars or the LMP2 cars. In that case, I think that this is a big benefit for them.
Yeah.
I'm just, again, hoping for the rest of the classes that it doesn't cause any unnecessary drama going in. Of course, you mentioned driving standards. Those can all be addressed, and I think, frankly, should be addressed through harsher penalties in the race rather than it's a racing incident. But time will have to tell on that one.
Yep. It's all a fine line, right? It's all a fine line, and there's so many different elements that play into, I guess, this elegant dance that we see as sports car racing, and adjusting one thing can have lots of trickle-down effects. So hopefully the trickle-down effects of this are all positive.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about the actual race. There's a couple more things on top of the class split procedures that I want to talk about here. I mentioned earlier in the episode that the Rolex 24 is usually a good indication of what we can sort of expect from the season, right? So like last year, Porsche Penske Motorsport, very strong, winning the race. Look at what they did in the championship. We've seen drivers in the past as well who put together a similar thing. I talked about Connor Zilisch earlier in the episode. What an incredible battle that he was putting on in the morning. What an incredible debut in that car for him last year. And then, of course, that became a talking point for all of the endurance races that he was a part of last season.
Yep.
Look at Tom Blomqvist in 2023. We were talking about him as the driver of the race. I think you and I were mutual on saying that. And helped propel that team towards what should have been a championship in 2023, but ultimately fell short because of the penalty that they were assigned after Daytona. Yep. Nonetheless, he was a standout driver for that season. I think this is a race that you can look at. It's a fresh start for everybody. I already talked about how a lot of teams and drivers are in new positions in 25. I think this could be a good indication of what to expect for this year. So hopefully with some of the new driver and team pairings that we have, some of the new cars that we have coming onto the grid, or actually not at this race, new cars coming onto the grid. That'll be waiting for Sebring. But hopefully we'll see a little bit of what to expect in the 25 IMSA season in a positive way.
You weren't completely wrong there. There is the BMW, the
Evo.
M3 Evo, yeah.
Yeah.
Mostly the same car, though.
Yeah. Also, another thing with the 24 is just it's difficult to know how this race is going to play out, because I already talked about the impact that late race yellows have on some of these IMSA races, but it's difficult to know how the middle of this race is going to go. I think at Petit Le Mans last year was one of the cleanest overall endurance races I've seen in recent IMSA history. And the whole middle stage of the race is really going to dictate how the end of this race goes. Because if you have proper separation between those classes, if you have cars start to go 1, 2, a few laps down and sort of let the race progress naturally, the impact that those late race yellows would have would be a lot less significant than it would be if we had a bunching up of the field every couple of hours where everyone stays on the lead lap.
Yeah, you're definitely right. It's because that the more yellows that you have, the more opportunities you're gonna have for people to get laps back and things like that. So it would be interesting for sure if we. How long was that green period at Petit? It was like
6 hours, maybe
yeah,
5-6 hours.
It was like close to at least like half the race. Yeah, so that would certainly throw a wrench into it. I mean, we usually see some long stints of green here at the Rolex, but I mean, in the past few years at least, the longest one that I can really remember is kind of like 3-4 hours long. And even still, that might be a stretch, but the yellows obviously affect strategy a lot in IMSA, and as you alluded to earlier, like if we see one in the final couple of hours, throw a lot of what you've learned throughout the race out the window at that point, because it could be wide open to a number of different cars.
Yep. Gonna go over some race predictions here where we take turns throwing darts at the board on who we think's gonna win, so we can look smart on the internet, and if nothing else, it doesn't matter.
We're gonna do better at this year.
Oh yeah, try to get to some
our
questions at the end of the episode here, because I see there's been a lot of questions going in the chat, and then we'll wrap things up with just a couple more thoughts from the race itself, as people who have gone to the race previously, and of course you going again this year. I will take liberty of giving a prediction first off.
First one of the season. Let's go.
And think down the expansive GTP class and who's going to be a pick there. I was going to do it. I was actually going to pick the 31 and just continue the joke from last year.
Oh, that would be good.
But I don't want to jinx them on the, I don't want to start them off on the wrong foot. They might have been my pick for the race last year. And it really sort of set off a tone for their entire season last year, which is just falling short time and time again.
No, we're past the point of doing that, though. We got that all out of our system last year. This is the year of the not jinx. This is the year where everything that we say comes true.
Okay, I'll do it then. 31. They were, again, second fiddle last year. They were very close to that race win. We had an epic battle in the final hour of the race between them and the 7 Porsche. They have the tools to win this race. They have some new drivers in that car with inexperience to that V-Series R, but they are a championship-winning team in IMSA. They've won this race multiple times before, and really, they need to get this season off on the right foot. Last year was a very disappointing season for them. They were champions in IMSA in 2023 last year. Not a single race win. I'll do the thing, and I'll pick the 31 as the race winner here this year.
I like it. I think that, that it's a team that I haven't thought a whole lot about yet, but they have a strong lineup there: Jack Aiken, Earl Bamber, Frederick Vesti, and Felipe Drugovich. So it's a strong driver lineup, and we know that the Cadillac is strong at in the Rolex 24. They've proven it the first 2 years of this race, so 31's a strong one. I was debating on a Cadillac as well. The one I was looking at was out of the Wayne Taylor Racing camp, but I've since changed my mind. And I'm going to go with, I hope I'm not just following what my heart is telling me and throwing logic out the window here, but the 60 Myer Shank Racing Acura, they're going for 3 in a row on their of Rolex 24s that they participated in.
Good point.
Obviously missed last year's, but I think you have Tom Blomqvist. We've talked about him. He's incredible in clearly whatever car you put him in around here. And I think reuniting him back with Colin Braun as full season competitors throw in Scott Dixon and Felix Rosenquist just for good measure, and you have a pretty darn strong lineup there. I think Myer Shank Racing hits the ground running in GTP this year.
They were the ones I was eyeing, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Definitely was looking at what they did this weekend at the Roar, talked about how strong they were earlier. They were an easy pick to make. I'm surprised you mentioned the Wayne Taylor Racing Group as well.
Yeah.
A little surprised neither of us picked them, to be honest with you, because I do think they're going to have more success with that Cadillac program this year. Acura program wasn't doing them a whole lot of favors, really. They were really the sort of the second strongest team with that Acura program behind Myer Shank for the duration of the GTP program that they had in 23. I expect more things out of them this year. Of course, they're carrying a strong driver lineup to that car as well. So certainly wouldn't be shocked to see them start the year on a good note as well, to sort of offset what we had seen past couple of years where they've had some disappointing results. But I'll see if they're a smart pick there as well.
Yeah. The Cadillac's a tough beat. I mean, we didn't even mention Porsche in this.
No.
Porsche's been pretty darn good in this race as well. So I think this is gonna be a really fun race, I think. I mean, all races are fun, let's be honest, but I think that there's so many cars that have legitimate, very good shots to win this.
Yeah. Speaking of, I was very strategic picking GTP first because I knew that LMP2 would be more difficult, and I knew that I could throw that one at you first. So I'm going to hear what you got to say here.
I have mine. Actually, I found this one easier than the GTP pick. So I'll be throwing it back to you pretty quickly here. I'm going to go with the number 99 AO Racing entry. PJ Hyatt, Dane Cameron, Johnny Edgar, and Christian Rasmussen. Of course, this is... There's a couple names that you're immediately drawn to, I think, in this driver lineup. Dane Cameron, he won was it the GTP championship in IMSA last year. He's won a lot. Very good driver, and a big score to have in the number 99 Orica this season. I like him to hit the ground running in that class. Johnny Edgar has shown good pace as well, and Christian Rasmussen, this is a driver that has been very strong in LMP2 the past few years. I think it was 2 years ago, the moment where I really truly realized how good Rasmussen was. I think it was at 6 Hours of the Glen 2 years ago. He was in a battle at the end of that race, I believe, for the win, and I can't remember I think he was with Era at the time, and I can't remember if they ended up taking that victory or not, but it was just really impressive to watch him battle, and I really like the lineup in this 99. They showed PJ Hyatt showed really good pace, especially in qualifying. I know qualifying for a 24-hour race doesn't really mean much, but I think PJ Hyatt takes another step sort of this year overall, and it starts here at the Rolex with a big win in LMP2.
Like that pick, I was definitely considering them. I'll do the thing here, and I'll only do it this once, which is picking the car that was the fastest in the Roar, but only because I have a lot of faith in that pairing, and especially with how strong they were last year as well. The 04 CrowdStrike Racing by APR. Look at the driver lineup in this car.
Oh, yeah.
Malte Jakobsen, Peugeot protege driver. He's going to be racing with them in 25. One of the strongest young drivers in prototype racing, period, let alone just LMP2. Colton Herta, very strong IndyCar driver coming over. He has LMP2 experience before. He'll be bringing a lot of talent to that lineup. You have Toby Sowery coming over as well. And then, of course, George Kurtz making his return to the IMSA LMP2 ranks after dropping out midway through last year. That team to me is just a standout with how strong the driver lineup is, how experienced the driver lineup is. And of course, it just helps a little bit that they were fastest at the Roar, but I'm not going to read too far into that. I think they're going to be the ones on top, though, after 24 hours next weekend.
Yeah, it's really hard to argue with that. Like, you there are what 12 entries in the LMP2 class.
Yep.
And you go from one entry to the next, and you're like, oh yeah, they got a good chance to win this as well. Oh yeah, that next entry, like, they could get on the podium pretty easy. And it's like that with every single one of these entries. There's so many strong entries, so many former winners, so many former series champions. LMP2 is underrated, I think, in the racing that it gives us.
We'll agree with that. I'll retweet that one.
You'll retweet that. What does it even call it? Repost.
Repost it.
That's
Sure,
what it is.
we'll take it.
Come on, it's 2025 now. We got to go with the times.
I gotta get with the times. Listen, man, old habits die young. GTD Pro. I'm looking down the lineup right now because I gotta be honest with you. I'm making these up on the spot. Okay, that's the best way to do it. The best picks I've ever had in the past were when I just didn't think about it, just picked one, threw the dart, hit the board, landed it.
I was making picks when we were talking about stuff earlier. I came into this with no picks, and then I got out. I have a whiteboard in my lap, and I was just scribbling down a couple notes. That's the best way to do it. Gut feel.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? Honestly, for this one, give me experience. Give me Corvette Racing, number 4. It has been a while since they've won the 24 Hours of Daytona. I think the last time they did was in 2020. Was it 2020 when they won? I know they won in 2020 in GTLM. They haven't won that race since then, to my knowledge. And just talking about experience with that lineup, that is a pretty experienced long-term driving lineup with that car. Tommy Milner, Nico Verone, of course, racing with AWA last year, won a championship, albeit with the C8R in the World Endurance Championship. And then you're finishing up that lineup with Nicky Katzberg, also WEC champion in that car, or not that car, but the C8R, very similar car. To me, I'm just going to go with experience in this one. There's a lot of new contenders here, but a lot of new contenders also means a lot that can not go to plan. So I think in this one, I'll take the mature strategy. In 2021, thank you for refreshing my memory on that one. I'll give you a reason at the end of the episode why my mind is so shot. I promise is an excuse I have.
Well, you took the number 4?
I did.
Number 4. I had the I just erased it. I had one of the Corvettes down. So, in the interest of interesting, I will. I'm gonna switch it up here. And honestly, it's like LMP2. You keep going down these lists, and you're like, oh yeah, that's a really good lineup as well. Last year at the Rolex, Ferrari was very strong. Maybe part of that was due to a little bit of performance manipulation that they ended up getting penalized for coming out of the race. Not as severe as Myer Shank Racing the year before that, though. But I still like Ferrari to be really strong here once again. And there's a Ferrari entry that features a very, very, very good lineup in GTD Pro, and that is the number 81 Dragon Speed. Albert Costa, Davide Rigon, Miguel Molina, and Thomas Neubauer are the 4 drivers in that car. Maybe I butchered the name slightly of one of them.
I think you're pretty good.
We're getting better at this. But give me that number 81 Ferrari.
And that's fun because that's a team that just sort of showed up late in the season last year with their GT debut in IMSA. So I'm interested to see what they can do because this will be their first 24 in that class. With that car. Yeah,
but we do know that Dragon Speed has plenty of experience winning the 24 as well. So, maybe can avoid some of those, brain farts if you could call them,
Sure.
that
We'll go with
that
that.
you sometimes have. But like, man, I'll tell you this though, in my in me, I re- uh, I gotta cheer for the Trackhouse 91. Like
Yeah.
that car
Yeah.
is it's such a fun lineup. Like Ben Keating, Connor Zilic, Scott McLaughlin, Shane Van Gisbergen. How much fun would it be to see them go out and win a race with legitimate backing in TF Sport supporting that entry as well.
Yeah, of course, TF Sport running that Corvette program over in the World Endurance Championship. No shortage of knowledge with that car. That's sort of like an all-star driver lineup,
Yeah.
where it's like you take a little bit from everywhere. Connor Zilic is over on the NASCAR side now, but of course, we've seen what he could do at IMSA last year. Scott McLaughlin and Shane Van Gisbergen talked to me back in 2019 when I was watching
Yeah.
those two ferociously battle in the Supercars Championship over in Australia and telling me they'd be teammates in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Cars Championship for a race. Wouldn't ever believe that one.
With a guy that was like 16 at the time,
Right.
and with a guy
Younger
that
than
owns a
that.
big car dealership chain in Texas. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and of course Ben Keating, the final driver to make that lineup fun. He's just he's gone around the ringer with sports car racing. He's driven. There was a point where he had driven every GTE car except the M8. So of course he just picks a new thing every year, a new challenge,
I
and attaches himself to it. Last year he was in a GTP car, and now he's in
Yep.
GTD Pro. So he's all over the place. But
I think
just
this
enjoying time.
I think this completes his IMSA class. He's competed in all the classes now. I think this GTD Pro is the final class that he's yet to compete in. So, oh man, another double duty for Ben is kind of insane.
Yeah.
And he's
Yeah, of
only
course.
won the race once. He only has one class win, and it was back in
Really?
like 2015, I think. Yeah,
Wow.
it's kind of wild.
It's also, you talked about drivers that you're bringing to that car. I've talked in the past about specifically at Daytona and the 24 where some, we'll call them outside drivers come in. That is a car that's going to bring a lot of people from
Oh, yeah.
outside of sports car racing. A lot of people are going to be rooting for that car that come from the NASCAR side. Of course, Scott McLaughlin now heavily associated with IndyCar. And, Ben Keating for us sports car racing fans is always a fun one to root for. I'm no doubt in my mind that's going to be a crowd favorite, if not maybe the favorite in that class for that race.
Yeah, that the IMSA YouTube stream is going to be full of New Zealand and Australian folks, I'm sure.
Yeah, Australian because Supercars fans, but I was going to say
Yes.
both Scott and Shane are New Zealanders.
Yes.
Kiwis.
Yes.
All right, you want to bring us home, GTD?
Oh, GTD, our biggest class, and man, it's kind of like throw a dart on the wall and
That's what we've
see
been
where
doing
it
for the past
lands.
20 minutes.
Yeah, that's true. GTD, I don't know. I feel the least comfortable picking a car in GTD, to be honest. But I think the most comfortable of the least comfortable picks. Man, how long have we been doing it? We're an hour and 9 minutes in. Just like the mind is mushing together at this point. But give me the number 12 Vasser Sullivan Lexus. We always know that this is a strong entry. Vasser Sullivan is always strong in these races. They're always going to be kicking around. They know what it takes to win, championships, big race wins. I don't know if they have a Rolex 24 win yet. Maybe someone in the chat can help us out with that. But Jack Hawksworth, Parker Thompson, Frankie Montecalvo, and there's a TBD driver there. That's Townsend Bell is doing double duty,
Yeah.
I think, between the 12 and the 14. So give me the lowest number, actually, the lowest numbered car in the GTD class this season, the number 12 Lexus.
I like it. bit of a safe pick. We always just pick
Yeah.
Vassar, Sullivan, Lexus when we're not sure. At least you didn't pick Windward. I guess that would have been even easier from last
Yeah,
year's
that's
trends.
true.
Ooh. Looking at the board here.
There's a lot.
guess-
There's a lot of good entries in here,
I
and
guess
there's
I'll throw my dart with the other Mercedes, which is the Korthoff Competition Motors. I got that correct off the bat.
almost gotcha.
Car number 32. I almost called him Korthoff Preston again. Maxi Goetz, Kenton Cook, and the third driver in that car is escaping me. It is Daniel Morad in that car. To me, that's a team in the past that is a strong team in IMSA. Strong driver lineup for this race as well. And we'll just, it's a dart on the board. To be honest with you, that's the pick I am the least confident in across all the ones I've given here today.
Oh, yeah.
Just because there's so many cars in the GTD class, it's like
Yeah.
completely random. But I'll try to justify it with whatever means I can, and say the Korthoff Competition Motors Mercedes will win the 24 next weekend.
I like it. I like it. I think Mercedes were another one that I was, thinking about here. Could a Ferrari sneak through the 45 Wayne Taylor Racing? The Porsche enthusiast surprisingly mentioned Wright Motorsports in the chat. Shocking, I know. But
Sure,
they're another one. We know how strong Rexy was in this race last year. So, there's going to be some good racing in all four of the classes. But yeah, GTD is the hardest one to predict for sure. And it's not just because it's a high car count. It's a little bit random at times too.
Yeah. Well, there's just more at play. I mean, you have to factor in bronze driver. You have to factor in how much experience does that team have with that car. And of course, as we've said, there's just more cars to pick from. So a lot of new factors in that class for sure.
Yep.
All right. I will go back and try to hit some of the question.
Are we doing a bold prediction this year as well?
I forgot the bold prediction.
Yeah.
Okay. I forgot the bold prediction. We'll take it though.
Yeah.
And you want to take this first? Because I haven't even had a chance to think about it yet.
This is where we truly get to shine with bold predictions. So I was thinking about this earlier. I didn't want to just go full homer with Faf because, I'm not about that this year. I'm not about that. It's all about making the best predictions that we can. This is a new year for the Rain Race podcast. So I'm going back to the well.
Rookie hour in 24.
Yeah, rookie hour in 24. We got our rookie stripes off last year. And now we're like, was it sophomores? Yeah. We're not going to go through a sophomore slump though. No. So I was thinking about this and I'm going back to the well of a car that got picked, I know by me, as a bit of a crutch for bold predictions last year, but hear me out. Okay. I'm going with the number 63, the SC63, to get its first top 5 in IMSA at the Rolex 24. I think that the class that it's a 12 car class. The SC63 has shown good pace, whether it was last year in testing when they did the IMSA testing here last year. They showed good pace again back in November at the IMSA sanction test, and they're showing good pace again this past weekend at the Roar. I know that it's not going to be easy. They have a very quick get up to pace period with Riley, but they know what they're doing. And you have a very strong driver lineup in this car as well. It's a car that I'm not super concerned about reliability issues. You see that, both of the cars survived the 24 hours of Le Mans. They were a couple laps down, but no significant issues. And this car survived the 12 hours of Sebring last year. Their previous best finish in the GTP class was 7th, and that was at Sebring last year. I think that the SC63 should have the pace, and I think has the reliability and the driver lineup to be able to go out and get a solid top 5 in the opening round of 2025.
Fair
So that's where
pick.
I'm going.
I think either you or I had made like the exact same pick last year with either Indianapolis or
Oh,
maybe Petit.
probably.
Because I know, like with the World Endurance Championship as well, we kept saying, "Oh, Peugeot's going to be in the top 5 this race,"
Yeah.
and then like the one race they got in the top 5, we didn't pick it. So that shows you what we were doing last year. In the interest of Daytona here, and sort of being the home of IMSA photo finishes, I'll give it that claim. I'm going to claim that in just one of the 4 classes, call this a very safe pick, but in one of the 4 classes, we're going to have a finish for the win that is less than a second between the top 2 cars.
Okay.
Don't know which class it might be. I'm going to leave it wide open. And I was going to say half a second, but then you told me that we need to be a little bit more confident with our picks this year. And I'll just give it a
Double
nice
it.
rounded full second and say that we'll get a close finish for the win in one of those classes. Hopefully at the expense of a very lengthy hour-long battle between those cars and not a one-lap shootout. Because
True.
that would be a rather interesting thing to discuss after next week's show.
Very true. Yeah, we gotta start making our bold predictions, a little bit less bold and more just realistic here, because people gotta take us seriously, right? We can't. People aren't gonna take us seriously if I go out every week and say that the SC63 is gonna get on the podium or something. But yeah, we gotta we we need bold predictions, but not too bold.
Keep it safe-ish.
Yeah,
I didn't even call
exactly.
it bold last year. I just called them bonus predictions. But usually that was just you and I being clowns.
That's true. Yeah,
Uh,
you're right. You did call them bonus predictions. Yeah, because
yeah.
sometimes we would talk about like safety cars, I think, and stuff like that.
Yep. Okay, let's take a look at what some people in the chat have been saying this episode and give some of the thoughts on those. And then we should be ready to wrap up the episode after that. A couple more things to talk about after that, actually. Porsche update is looking very practical. New cooling front. Rear is now in the same configuration as the WEC. Yeah, Porsche did bring a couple of new upgrades to their car for this year. So I don't expect this going to be a night and day difference. Of course, this is still a class that falls under balance of performance, but perhaps just even making that car even stronger across the length of the season. More consistent is generally what those teams are trying to extract out of those cars. More consistency, rather. So that it's just more predictable race to race. And then, of course, being a 24-hour race, reliability as well. Any chance that you have to make that car more reliable and more consistent
Yep.
over a 24-hour race is going to help you. And I know neither of you or I picked Porsche, but I definitely think they're going to be one to watch out for this year with how strong they were in the 2024 season across both championships, really.
Yeah, yeah. We didn't really talk about Porsche a whole lot in this, but yeah, they need to be taken seriously.
I'm going to the race for the. Okay, I'm going to the race, but for the first time, and I'm worried about the crowds being overwhelming. I will say the nice thing about Daytona is there was never a point in the 2 years where I went, and hopefully this year the crowds are even a little bit bigger because it seems like that's the trend we're on right now. Is that it is a very large facility, and I never felt like the race was too crowded. Granted, if
Yeah,
you're trying to get to the front of the sort of grid, I don't know what I want to call it, the front of the grass when they're doing the car parade before the race,
yeah.
you might struggle a little bit with that. But
Walking the
it's
garage before, like the morning of the race,
yeah.
too. Yeah, you're
There
not
are
getting anywhere.
there are definitely scenarios where it's going to be busy, but not on the level of like an Indianapolis 500, 24 Hours of Le Mans, where you just feel like you're actually crammed into those events half the time. I don't think you'd have anything to worry about with the crowds being overwhelming. The one thing I will say is don't underestimate the traffic, because I had a friend I still do have a friend who's been to that race for the last 10 plus years now straight. every single year, and he's been telling me how much quieter it used to be getting into the track on race morning, and then nowadays, the great part of having record crowds is that we can say we have record crowds. The negative part of it is it makes it a lot more difficult to actually get into said crowd.
Yep.
So don't underestimate that. Just leave some time to prepare getting into the race, and then of course parking as well. If you're not parking at the track,
Oof.
have fun trying to figure out where you're going to get that done. Acura lineups look very strong. Be on the look for Oda stints. Those GT500 cars are just as fast as a GTP, and he has good experience with GT3 traffic. I like your thinking there with the GT500 cars, because you're right. Those are silhouette cars. I'll just say they're basically prototypes in the shell of GT-looking cars, but not really production-based like you would see in GT3. So he does have experience in cars that have similar amounts of grip, similar lap times at a similar circuit. Really, the only comparison we get is Fuji between WEC prototypes and the GT500 cars. But of course, this will be his first race in that Acura ARX 06, and to my knowledge, first race at Daytona as well. And he's with a team that you and I are already saying is a favorite to win this race. So looking forward to seeing what he can do as a rookie in this race, and perhaps maybe a rookie Rolex on his wrist. We'll see.
True.
Hasn't been the first time. Happened last year with Connor Zilish.
It's true.
Okay, so this is a question. Just reading down in order here, but I like the question, so I'll get onto it.
Yeah.
At the end, can you elaborate on the sim racing you do? Sounded like I did some. Also, give credit to how awesome AMS2 is for more IMSA and LMU for the WEC Championship. Yeah, so I mentioned earlier I've been a little bit off my my game this episode. If I seem just a little bit lost for words sometimes, I'm running on very little sleep. It was the iRacing Daytona 24 this weekend, which I did compete in with the same team I usually compete in endurance races with. And we finished in the top 5. But let me tell you what, iRacing, ever since they put rain into the system, really loves to use it and abuse it. And we had a lot of rain running in the race this year. So I have been completely tired all day. Got a few hours of sleep this morning after the race was over, but my sleep schedule is way off. And so I'm a little bit off my rocker today, but had to do an episode today anyways. And of course, as you mentioned, for IMSA and the WEC right now to have representation in video games, with IMSA just getting that partnership with Automobilista 2 off the ground at the end of last year in Le Mans Ultimate. I play both games quite a bit. It's just really great to have that representation. It'd be even nicer if we could have a game with more console representation. I know IMSA has a partnership with Forza, getting those cars and liveries in the hands of more people. But yeah, any representation we get in video games is fine by me.
I agree. Sim racing is fun. I dabble in it a little bit too. I did do the 24 hours of Daytona as well, but mine was part of a league championship, and we did it last weekend. So we actually came out on top in that race in the GTD class. So we're still living that high.
There you go. That's better than, hey, we were 14 laps down in 5th place. So that'll tell you how that race went for everybody else in there. There are 22 GTP cars. I understand the reasoning for the class split on restarts, but I really hope it doesn't mean even longer yellow flag periods.
It shouldn't mean longer yellow flag periods. There's still going to be the same number of class splits, is my understanding. But sort of this additional GTD and GTD Pro class split is going to be taking place at the same time that the prototypes are doing their second class split. So it shouldn't make the green or the yellow flag period longer. And my understanding is they did some testing with it this weekend as well, during the Roar, and everything went as expected, smoothly, and the drivers had positive feedback on how everything went. So it shouldn't add any more complication. It shouldn't add any more time to the yellow flag period.
Which is, of course, what we'd want to see. I discussed this when we brought this up the first time when it was announced. If it's done correctly in theory, it shouldn't add any additional time, which
Yeah.
my issue with the whole way it was set up in the 24 Hours of Le Mans is that it was adding additional time. So if we can mitigate that, I think that's, positive.
Yep.
Let's see. Do you think BMW M-GTP, this is the BMW M Hybrid V8,
Yep.
will do good, possibly win or get a podium? I'm assuming this is talking specifically about Daytona here. Yeah, I talked earlier about how strong they were at the Roar, and I think a win, of course, is like very hard to know right now because we didn't have true representative running this weekend. But I definitely expect them to be strong this year. Whether that means a podium at Daytona, whether that means just having a significant amount of time leading the race, as long as they emerge from Daytona without any major concerns with that car, get through the entire 24 hours with both cars, look strong. You can generally tell when a car looks strong in the 24 hours of Daytona.
Yeah.
And that, as I mentioned earlier, that sometimes sets the tone for how their season might end up being. I think we'll emerge next weekend with a clearer picture of that. But I would say definitely don't discount the possibility that they're at least on the podium next weekend.
Yep. Yeah, I think we talked about it a lot earlier. I think we'll see some of the more true pace come out on Thursday for qualifying, and at that point I think we should have a good idea if this BMW is, if they look legit, or if maybe this was just testing pace.
Yeah. Still want to toss this question to you because I was sleeping during this race. With the whole iRacing thing going on.
Yeah.
What did we think of the VP Challenge races this weekend?
I haven't been able to catch up on them, to be honest. I was out during both of them. The notification came up on my phone and I'm like, I am driving. I can't watch this race right now. So, and I've not had an opportunity to watch them. I am planning to watch them on the plane ride down to Daytona.
It's good use of time.
Exactly.
And actually flying this year because you drove last year, didn't you?
No. I drove
okay,
to
you drove to Petite. You didn't, okay.
And Florida's like another 7 hours or something. Yeah. So, yeah, no. I'm flying.
Okay. Let's see. Mustang, or this is just a couple predictions from other people. Mustang or BMW win in GTD Pro. Ford was definitely hitting their stride at the end of last year. They were definitely getting stronger results.
Yeah, I thought about putting a Ford down as my pick, but I don't know. I don't know if we've seen enough from them yet. Like, I feel more comfortable with Corvette because I think Corvette towards the end of the season, they were consistently showing good pace. We did get a couple of races, to be fair, I guess, from Ford at the end of the year where they looked strong. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I'll say that. Like, I wouldn't be surprised at the end of the race. I don't know if I'd be surprised if any with any of the GTD Pro winners, but yeah. Ford could be on for it. BMW, I mean, they were strong in this race last year, and don't rule out Paul Miller Racing, right?
Yeah.
Paul Miller Racing knows what they're doing. They got it seems like they have a little bit more BMW support this year too. Definitely some more of the M team sort of livery details associated with that car. So
yeah, this factory car.
Yeah.
Or factory colors. Yep. one from Formula Jonah saying the LMP2 class is definitely hard to predict.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Gonna go for the 74 Riley, though. Got a good feeling about that car. Yeah, one I was looking at as well. Got a lot of star power with that lineup. Felipe Massa being part of that car for the second year in a row. Certainly no reason they couldn't be on top next weekend.
Yep. They have a full year under their belt in LMP2 machinery now too. So, yeah, I think that they'll be strong overall this season. I think that 74 will be a car that's right in the championship hunt again.
Yep. And Anthony Webster said, "Hey, I have a good feeling if Reese have a decent year, they could get that 499P next year, and you can quote me on that." So there are a couple caveats with this. So Reese as a team is not racing at the 24 Hours of Daytona. Mm-hmm. Maybe that changes in some of the later IMSA endurance races this year. We'll have to see. But they are partnered with Dragon Speed for their GTD Pro entry. They're sort of helping out that entry this year. So I'm assuming that might be what you're talking about. As for them getting a 499P in IMSA next year, I think that's a tough call to make right now for sure. I'm not sure Ferrari is looking to expand that right now, but I guess if they did have that, if they did want to do that, then Reese would be in discussion with that, or we would at least be bringing them up for that discussion. But I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm not too confident personally that we see a 499P on the grid in IMSA next year.
There was an interesting tidbit that was mentioned in the Marshall Pruitt podcast, The Week in Sports Cars, in their most recent episode, or it was the one from last Wednesday or something. Go check it out for sure. But it was about the Ferrari, and they mentioned in that episode that Ferrari was a little annoyed at the penalties that were handed out at the end of the Rolex last year. You'll remember that Ferrari got one of those penalties. So that there was mention that don't expect a 499P in IMSA anytime soon. That did not help relations between the manufacturer and IMSA.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's the first time I had heard of that. But the penalty they got last year wasn't really
it was a slap on the wrist. I mean, you know what? To be fair, it did kind of destroy their shot at like a manufacturer's. It was manufacturer points, which do mean a lot to those manufacturers. For them, it would have,
Yeah, but it doesn't mean anything to Ferrari because they weren't racing in the class full time anyways.
They were
right.
Reese was racing Endurance Cup.
Oh yeah, so I guess for the Endurance Cup championship, sure.
Yeah. So it would have been disappointing for that, but I also think that Ferrari, they're not going to want anybody bad mouthing them, right? Like they're not enjoying waking up and seeing that in the news.
Right. Yeah. Okay, let's see. I lost my position here in the chat. Let's see where we were.
Where are our questions?
Oh, we had another super chat come in. So thank you for that. What about Inception Racing or Turner Motorsports? So Inception, of course, they had their car change to a Ferrari at the last couple of races of last year.
I feel like Inception is one of those cars that, again, we talk about a lot in that, like, it's surprising that they haven't won a race
that's
yet.
what I was thinking. I was trying to think of the exact same thing, but just how to say it.
Yeah.
Because, they are one of those lineups. I think you and I have even picked them a few times, maybe last year.
Yeah.
But they've just kind of been there.
Yeah.
Hasn't really been a standout performance. And Turner Motorsports, if you want to talk about veteran sports car racing programs, talk about maybe the most veteran program in the game, apart from, I guess, Corvette Racing. They're always there in the background. They haven't really been as prominent at the 24 in recent years as they had previously, but I never really completely discount them just because of how much experience they have at that race. So
they have a strong lineup as well. Like you look at those other GTD class lineups, and there's not many that I think you would take over what Turner is going to be rolling out there this year. I think, again, would not be surprised to see them on the top step of the podium, this time next week.
Yep. Let's see. Let's hope the Rolex 24 ends cleanly, unlike the last 2 years. Well, let's hope it's actually 24 hours. That would be a good start.
Yeah.
And not 23:58. But and then we'll work off of that. I think that's a good starting point.
Nomi had a question. Are Proton and JDC opting to take the upgrades? They have to take the upgrades since it's part of the car's, I guess, homologation now. So
yep,
it is. Porsche used one of their jokers for these upgrades. So yeah, it's going to be fitted on any Porsche 963 in any of the championships this year.
So jumping back to a question since it was brought up earlier, the Daily Sports Car article about a potential 22 car hypercar grid at Le Mans. Sorry, I missed that question, but thank you for the reminder. So I did not have a chance to read that article today. I do know one of the talking points that came out of that is that at least one Wayne Taylor Racing Cadillac has filed for an entry into that race. I have it on decent authority that you can expect at least one of those Wayne Taylor Racing Cadillacs on the grid at Le Mans this year. Potentially two. But I think more likely what you're going to see is one Wayne Taylor Racing car, the Action Express Cadillac, and then the two Jotas, so 4 Cadillacs total on the grid at Le Mans this year. As for everything else that was noted in there, I didn't have a chance to read through it yet, but of course we would be expecting the third Porsche Penske Motorsport 963, who got an auto invite for the IMSA Championship last year. So I will do my homework and read up on that, and then hopefully have time to get back to that in a future episode.
Indeed. Aaron Pfeiffer jumping in and wanting to make a prediction in GTD Pro. Aaron, yes, Aaron, we know who you're picking. The number 91 TF Sport Superstar car with all the fellas from NASCAR and IndyCar and Ben Keating. That's
well, I
Aaron's
mean,
prediction.
as long as the strategist for that car is any good, but I mean,
That's
who knows?
true.
He might.
It's an all-star car behind the wheel, but on top of the pit box.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
For people who don't know, Aaron is going to be doing strategy for.
I would never slander
car.
I would never slander an IMSA strategist without having it as a joke for somebody who commented it in the chat.
That's true.
I want Turner Motorsports to run a Privateer M Hybrid V8. Those Turner colors would look great. They would look very good on a prototype. And that's really all I can say. Maybe someone's done it for iRacing, but I don't really see that one happening either. I haven't heard BMW brought up customer racing in the past. Back in 23, I want to say that they were at least commenting on it with that car, and we haven't really heard anything since. At least I haven't. So I don't know if I would hold out hope for that one, but I certainly agree with you that it would look very nice on the grid if it did happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really much space for customer cars anymore, to be honest. Like,
unless it just became unless they just replaced the GT program with that. But I really don't see Turner sacrificing that GT program that's been around for 20 plus years.
Yeah, that's kind of like that's their
25 plus years now. I looked at the we're on 2025 now.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple more. Thoughts on the hypercar GTP Ford rumors? Is there's not a concern with, or if there's not a concern with grid space for all these entries?
Yeah.
It's definitely picked up traction since we last talked about it. So there's two manufacturers that are really in the fold right now, heavily rumored, being McLaren and Ford, and then Mercedes is like kind of off in the background a little bit. Great concern, of course, is the number one thing, especially in the World Endurance Championship, where it seems like they're struggling more than IMSA, even though we're kind of at capacity grids for both series, to be honest with you. But I guess I'll cross that bridge when we get there. I'll wait for a formal commitment from Ford if we ever get one before discussing how they might want to approach that. But of course, it goes without saying any new manufacturer on the GTP grid, especially one with as much of a fan base as Ford, would pull into IMSA. We already see what they're doing with fan engagement with those GT cars.
Yeah.
Having a prototype would only expand that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the WEC is probably a different can of worms, having a smaller grid capacity than IMSA, generally speaking. I don't think it would be an immediate issue in IMSA, though. These things tend to have a way to work themselves out, and if you're IMSA, you could probably implement sort of a cap on, LMP2 and, GTD. There's usually enough turnover from year to year anyways that you can squeeze a couple of cars in.
Yep. Okay. Oh, and then just not correcting me, but informing me from the DSC article that extra entries for Le Mans would be seemingly one Action Express, one Wayne Taylor Racing, one Penske, and one Proton, which is about what I would have expected. I just think the Aston will be. So I'm just. You think Aston will have an extra Valkyrie brought to Le Mans like Porsche, with cars numbered 007, 008, and 009 possibly? Not this year, I would say. Perhaps maybe future seasons, something we start discussing. But with this year, I think Heart of Racing is maybe already stretched a little bit thin.
Yeah.
With the programs between both championships, we know they had to double up that WEC commitment in the hypercar class from what they had initially planned. So I really don't anticipate that being a thing this year.
Are they still running one of the LMGT3 cars as well? I don't remember. No? Okay. That would make sense.
No, we're...
Who's running the Astons?
Who's running the Aston?
Please
tell me, because...
Was there a Spirit?
I'm drawing a blank right now. I'm completely drawing a blank, but Heart of Racing is going up to prototype, and I'd have to... Well, in the spirit of why not, let's just look it up right now, because I've completely blanking on...
No, it's not TF Sport.
Corvettes.
Yeah, TF Sport's running the Corvettes.
They are running one. Okay, I was trying to remember.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, so...
With who?
Racing Spirit of Le Mans is replacing D Station.
Okay.
So they're still running.
I knew D Station was out. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Well, that answers that.
That does make sense. Who will be the third driver for Porsche 4 at Le Mans? Verline? Is it Verline? Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, Verline's racing at Daytona with JDC this year, so
that's true. That's gotta be a pretty good indicator that he could be on for a Le Mans ride.
Yeah, I would say he's maybe the one I would pick right now.
Yeah.
Just off that basis, Vettel, is still in the rumor mill a little bit as of a couple months ago, but we'll see. He's only had that initial test so far. Remember that Le Mans is a huge race for Penske and Porsche. They're not just going to throw somebody in as a PR stunt. And I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying throwing Vettel in the car is a
wow, you're saying that Vettel
don't put your
sucks?
pitchforks away. Oof. But I'm just saying, in general, they're going to probably prioritize experience at a race like that before putting somebody like Vettel in. Would be my guess.
It would have made a lot of sense to get Vettel some more seat time at the rookie test, which I think he would have been eligible for. So, that would have made a lot of sense, and that would probably be really hyping up Le Mans next year if that was the case.
All right, I want to give a couple more quick thoughts on the. Oh, sorry, one more question. With another super chat. Thank you for that. What are your thoughts for Cadillac WEC in 25? I will give more in-depth thoughts on that in a future episode when we preview the WEC. But of course, Joda's picking up that program this year. I think they're going to be more successful than Ganassi. I sort of touched on that a little bit before, but Joda is a race-winning team in the World Endurance Championship. They're now going to have the factory support that they wanted for a while now behind them, and sort of just becoming that Cadillac factory team over there. I think this is going to be a season where maybe we even look at them as a possible championship contender. So I'll throw that out there this early on. But I'll talk about that a little bit more when we discuss the rest of the WEC season, which is coming up very soon, by the way. So it should only be a couple episodes from now. Okay, couple things I want to touch on for the end of the episode. Just wanted to give a couple more thoughts for anybody who might be going out to the Rolex 24 this weekend. I know we had somebody in here saying it's their first time going. Couple of my favorite things to do during the 24 hours of Daytona, and a couple tips and tricks. First of all, just get around the track. It is a very accessible track, which is a very nice thing to say about it. And it's not always that way for a 24-hour race. Like, having been to Daytona and Le Mans, it is a lot easier to get around Daytona than it is to get around the Circuit de la Sarthe, where you have to basically plan your day out in advance on where you're going to be and what time. Tram service at Daytona is very easy. Just step on, go to the infield, walk around the infield, get those different vantage points. Of course, the start and the finish, if you want to watch those from the grandstands, is probably going to be the best place to catch all of it. They do have some video boards you can see there. I think closer down towards turn 1, if you want to see those video screens. Although I don't remember exactly where they'd place them.
Yeah, if you're in the grandstands, you can see them. You can see them in like the turn 1 braking zone area.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's where you and I both were last year at the start. You were only a couple rows above me. So get around the track, go around the infield when you get the chance. There's a lot of... It's sort of a separate feel when you're on the infield. You're a lot physically closer to the cars there. You can sort of feel the energy from those cars a little bit more. It's just a different experience when you're over at that part of the track. I will also say, if you get the opportunity, and I know not everybody gets the opportunity to do this depending on who you're going to the race with or what your accommodations are, but if you have the chance to, one of my favorite things at Daytona the past couple of years I've been there is like 5 o'clock in the morning. Sunrise at Daytona is very late. It's close to 7 a.m. because it's sort of dead of winter. So the sunrise is very late. You can go out at like 5 o'clock in the morning. It's still pitch dark outside. The grandstands are seemingly empty. I mean, there are people there, but it feels like you have... Yeah, they're sleeping there. It feels like you have a giant 100,000 seat stadium to yourself almost. Completely quiet out there. And only way I can describe it is it sort of feels like a night at the museum where you can just go around, walk around the grandstand levels, and it's completely quiet. And it's just you and sports car racing going on, and you don't really have any other distractions going on. Last year, I also made a trek out for sunrise to NASCAR turns 3 and 4, which is over near the karting track on the infield. There's some campers set up over there, but most people are inside by that point of the night. There were a couple people out at the same time as me last year. Some of the IMSA credentialed photographers will go out there and get some sunrise photos. But again, that to me is my favorite part of the race, and it's unique to Daytona from at least the endurance races I've been to. Le Mans just does not get quiet at night. There's always people out doing stuff there. It's never quiet. To me, getting that opportunity to just get pure sports car racing with no distractions at Daytona that early in the morning, very much unbeaten.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I remember waking up early. I got a couple of hours of sleep in the car last year, and going up and sitting in the grandstands for a couple of hours, watching the sun slowly rise, and just having, yeah, it is much more quiet than it is, during the middle of the day, or even, kind of prior to the fireworks at night. So yeah, if you're at the track and you're able to, I would recommend. I echo that. It's a pretty cool spot.
Yep. And of course, finally, it's an IMSA race. I mean, what more can we say than how accessible it is? Try to get there a few hours early if you can. They have a very fun driver's parade. You can go walk around the banking at Daytona. You're not going to go over into the turns where it's really
You can
steep.
sign the start finish line.
But, yeah, you can sign the start finish line. You can walk up the less steep part of the banking over near the start finish line.
Which is still very steep.
It is. It's still steeper than it looks, I promise. And I can only imagine what it's like in the corners. I haven't had a chance to do that yet, but maybe someday. Just get around, do that. If you have some time, I think the autograph session is on Friday during the Pilot Challenge race, if I'm not mistaken. So, if you want to get up and close with the IMSA drivers, very accessible paddock. If it's the first time you're going to an IMSA race, I think you'll be thoroughly pleased with what you can see there.
There's going to be no film crews there this year, I don't think. So.
Yeah, no Brad Pitt, so that's, oh well on that front. But maybe for the rest of us, we get a little bit more accessibility.
Yeah. You don't have to worry. Yeah, the film crew's not going to be running around yelling at people this year, so that'll be nice.
They were yelling at the credentialed people last year, which is funny to me because it's, but
it's like, okay, guys.
And I will leave it at that. I think we had every
got
time
one
I'm about to do it, we get another question in, so I'll make sure I try to get to that.
We're rich with Argentinian pesos tonight.
I very much appreciate it. What are accommodations like inside the track? To be honest, it's kind of whatever you brought with you. It's if you were lucky enough to secure a camping spot, which you would have needed to do a long time ago, you can do that. But the inside of the track is pretty much just, again, you can bring a blanket with you and go up in the grandstands and try to find some places to sleep there. But otherwise, it's going to be sort of an old school experience, I would say. I would try to be prepared with what you want to have for the race, because there's not going to be a whole lot of opportunities for other things once you're in there. I didn't word that exactly how I wanted, but you probably get what I mean.
Yeah.
Still running on 2 hours of sleep here.
Yeah, it's a Rolex 24 brain already that you got.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be worse. Thank God we're not doing an episode next Sunday. That wouldn't be good either. I'll end it at that for now.
There was just one person that asked about there was a driver that crashed.
Yeah, I saw this earlier. So there was a Tower LMP2 car that crashed, and I saw that an ambulance got involved.
Oh, it was Tower?
I believe it was.
Was it in the last session today, or was it?
That's all I had seen, because I looked around for information about this afterwards. I couldn't find anything. So I, to be honest with you, didn't want to comment on it just because there wasn't a ton of information. But that's all I had seen from social media this afternoon.
Interesting. I see that. I'm not seeing anything about it. I'm just looking at sort of the Sports Car 365 like notes, and there was the Era Motorsport had a crash at the end of the final session today. But it doesn't mention anything about like an injury, and it doesn't sound like the car was in that bad a shape. So maybe something to keep an eye on. It can be difficult to say sometimes if a stretcher is brought out. It could be purely precautionary. So
and this is, again, it's why I didn't really want to comment on it. I did see it. But was hesitant to bring it up because it seems like there's just some information there that we haven't gotten yet. So, of course, hoping all things are well there. But we don't really have, at least I don't have any details on that at this time.
Yep.
And somebody did ask if we were going to be at the race. I personally will not be there this year, unfortunately, but Stu, you'll be there this year. And of course, if anybody mentions the podcast, I was lucky enough to see some people at Petit Le Mans come up to me and say they recognize me from the podcast. Of course, Stu will be there and happy to field your questions.
Oh yeah, ask me all the questions. Ask me about Canadian milk. If you see
Ask
me at
him
the
how
race,
he feels about his picks after 23 hours, and we'll see how that goes.
Depending on how they're doing, maybe don't ask me that.
Yeah. Okay, I will wrap it up there for this episode. We'll be back next week to discuss everything in review of this race. We're going to have plenty to discuss next week, so be sure to tune in if you want to see that. It's officially 2025. We'll be ramping up episodes again with the World Endurance Championship starting up soon again as well, and just a lot to look forward to in the next few weeks. Stu, any closing thoughts from you?
No closing thoughts from me. Just ready for the Rolex.
Ready as you'll be. All right. Thank you very much to everyone who tuned in this week. I hope to catch you next week at a more traditional time for another episode of the Rain Race Podcast. Take care.